funds. Angel keep it sharp, every deal done. David got the question, the code, the flow. Remote Ruby, let the whole world know. Remote Ruby, that's the play.
What's up, gentlemen?
GitHub's down. No, I'm just kidding. Well, not right this second.
Yeah, it was earlier. I forget, a few hours ago. The good news is that if you look at the status page, no downtime recorded today. So no issues, obviously.
Yeah.
Whatever you saw was a you problem.
Yeah. I'm sure it was. And then that issue they had like a week or two ago with all the actions failing, that was a me problem too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The actions is the one with the most red in the status page. But
couldn't do anything.
Yeah,
couldn't even deploy.
It's frustrating that you can't trust status pages at all. And I get like it's complicated. Some subset of servers could be down or whatever. And like you're hitting the local region that is having issues, but not all of things are down. But there might be too much noise to report every little thing. But still, when you can't get push and you're like, hey, your credentials are invalid. It's like, wait, did I get hacked or something? That is not the question I want to be wondering about when actually it's just an upstream problem.
Did you get hacked or did GitHub get hacked and they have to rotate all the sessions? And,
if you don't know, it could be an extremely painful rest of the day. And luckily, it seems like that was resolved and it wasn't that, thank God. But
well, someone posted like, all right, I think it's time to like think about what would it look like if we moved off GitHub. And I'm like, to where?
Dropbox.
Yeah, FTP, Cyberduck.
Shared folder, yeah.
We just come full circle.
August 13th, 2026 final V2 bug fix, hot fix something.
Dash, it'll actually work this time.
Yeah. I like
dash,
it.
Please.
Last night I was up to like 12:30 because apparently Bitbucket changed some of their API endpoints recently and OAuth just stopped working, but it gave me errors that were like token is invalid or something else. But it was actually like the URL used to be /API/2.0 and that switched to api.bitbucket.org/2.0. You couldn't have given me like a 404 or something more helpful. Instead, you lied to me about it being a token issue, a permissions thing or whatever. And I was like, that took way longer to figure out than I wanted it to. The funny part is if you search for OmniAuth Bitbucket, I forked a fork for my version of that is up to date. But when you Google it, it's like the original GitHub repos because doesn't seem like forks get much SEO, and mine being a fork of a fork is invisible, it seems. But everything is like you open up those repos, last commit 10 years ago, 11 years ago, 9 years ago. And I was like, ugh. So then I went to Bitbucket's website to like just double check, was the URL right for the host or something in the callback URL? It took me like 5 minutes of going through Atlassian's goddamn navigation to figure out where the hell to find that. I actually had to Google it and be like, where do I go to find the OAuth application settings? And it was like, you have to click on this, then go click on this gear over here, and then go to this nav item, and then it's way over here. And I was like, what is happening over there? That is the most enterprise thing that they could have done to Bitbucket. Poor Bitbucket.
And we can't have a Cloudflare redirect for the API.
Oh, no, yeah. We had to hard break that. We couldn't just redirected it. I don't know. Maybe they sent an email out about it changing or something, but I have no idea. I don't remember getting anything like that. So who knows? But anyways, you might have heard Ernesto's voice earlier. We've got a guest today. Ernesto, welcome back. I forget the last time you were on here. It's a while ago.
It's been a while, yeah. Well, hey, nice to be here. And quick intro, I'm Ernesto Tagwerker, founder and CTO at fastruby.io. And if you have ever upgraded Rails, you probably have run into some of our articles. And then I also run a consultancy on AI, which is called ombulabs.ai. And we do more like custom solutions and AI training for small businesses. And it's great to be here. I remember I've been here twice before, and one of those was the 100th episode, which I thought it was so special. And it's great to be back.
You were here for the 100th episode and the 46th episode. October 30th, 2020 was episode 100. Damn.
Whoa. So it's been like almost 6 years since you've been on the podcast? Really?
Jeez.
It's been a while, yeah. I've been meaning to be back here for like 6 years, and I finally sent an email to Chris like, hey, it's about time, I think.
I totally didn't realize it was that long ago. That's insane. It probably feels different because we do occasionally see each other at RailsConf or whatever in person. So it doesn't feel the same, but wow. Yeah. I wonder what this episode is not a special number. We can just skip ahead to episode 400 or something.
Yeah, I love it.
And we'll backfill.
Yeah, I feel like I chatted more with all of you and RailsConf, Blue Ridge Ruby, other conferences. And I'm probably going to see you again in Rails World in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Are you going to SF Ruby?
I wish I could, but I have a conflict. It's hard to manage parenting 3 kids and my wife who also has to go to her conferences. So unfortunately I can't make it to SF Ruby, but I would love to go.
Yeah. No, I understand that. I did my fair share of skipping things earlier this year for the little guy that was 6 months old. So I understand. What's new with you guys? Like, how is AI affecting consulting and Rails upgrades and everything? I'm excited to hear what you've experienced.
Yeah. So it feels like AI is definitely helping a lot in terms of like upgrading Rails. We open sourced Claude Code upgrade skill that has been helping us a lot. It's been making us more efficient. And sometimes, when we look at a project these days, instead of putting maybe 2 humans, we put like 1 human with the agent or with the Claude skill to do the upgrade. And it's made us more efficient. But then at the same time, it means that companies are like looking for fewer humans to help with their upgrade projects.
Right.
So yeah, that's been tricky to navigate. On the AI consulting side, we have been growing and basically building custom AI solutions for some clients. And that's growing. And I feel like there's a ton of work to be done and also a ton of education to be done, because I feel like there is a lot of misconceptions and a lot of FOMO and a lot of like dreams and marketing and hype. And the reality is like, yes, it can solve a ton of problems, but sometimes we encounter business owners and operators that just want to use AI for the sake of using AI when maybe an automation would be good enough for what they need to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can see that. The understanding of AI and what it's capable of is so everybody's experience with it is so vastly different. If you're not technical, probably feels very magical, especially when you can be like, build me this app, and it just goes and seemingly does it for you. But then when you get into more complicated situations of legacy application that you're trying to upgrade, I'm sure there's lots of weird nuance and things that it just is going to struggle with because it needs so much context that may or may not be documented, I would guess. Do you use it to like sort of backfill the test suite a bit to help out making the upgrade easier at first? Or, I'm curious to hear how the process for, say, a 10-year-old Rails app or something goes.
Yeah. Sometimes that helps, especially if you can feed it like real data from production, with anonymized values and real HTTP requests that come and go. But at the same time, I feel like you have to be very careful, like reviewing the test code that it generates. something like the mutant gem is really cool. And I feel like that's going to grow a lot because I feel like mutation testing is key to checking the quality of the tests that you get from AI.
A description of what the mutant gem does.
Well,
yeah.
before you
They're
do,
not
I'll just mention that at Blast Off Rails, EFAT gave a really good talk, and that was the first time I'd ever heard of the mutant gem. So I'll link that in the show notes, but go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I think it is a paid Ruby gem, which is weird in the Ruby community, but I think it's because it's worth it, right? It adds value. And I think it needs to keep track of what happens if you remove certain lines from an application code file. And that's basically what it does. It doesn't change anything in the test suite. It basically looks at the test file and it says, oh, this is testing the user RB model, right? Now let's check the login method in the model. And then it starts removing lines from the login method. And then it checks whether the test suite keeps passing or not. And then you're like, wait, you removed all these lines from the login method and the test continues to pass. So then you start asking yourself questions is like, why is this still passing if you're removing like real lines of code from a functional method? And then it flags it and it tells you like, hey, this particular test failed mutation testing. And then you can take a look and fix the test or make it more resilient. Part of the code that AI generates, in my opinion, is like very much like mocked and stubbed way too much. And that can be a problem because it can create a world that doesn't really exist. Basically, you end up with tests that give you a green light and they're like, cool, everything's fine. And then you deploy everything to production. And then that particular method, it starts failing. And you're like, well, what the heck? I have 100% code coverage on this particular method. And I got this bug. And then you find out it's like, oh, the test wasn't really testing the right way.
Let me tell you a quick story about our sponsor, Honeybadger.io. One time, a customer of theirs had a background job run overnight that caused hundreds of thousands of errors to be reported to Honeybadger by mistake. Like many other error tracking and performance monitoring tools, Honeybadger bills for monthly usage, and so this customer's mistake was going to cost them a lot of extra money that month. If you've ever used a monitoring service, you might have experienced something like this yourself. Well, fortunately for this customer, they emailed Honeybadger's support and received the most amazing reply. Honeybadger was resetting their monthly quota and canceling the bill. This is just one example of how much the small team at Honeybadger cares about their users. Ask anyone you know and you'll hear similar stories. Go check them out at honeybadger.io. It's free to get started and setup takes less than 5 minutes. Don't forget to bookmark it. That's www.honeybadger.io. People's advice for a long time is like avoid them if at all possible. It's not always possible, but like I've noticed that too, where you made up this fake object. It mimics some of the real world, but it is not the real world. Even something like VCR where you're recording, say, a Stripe API call or something. It's like Stripe's API can change and your tests are going to continue passing because you didn't update those to the latest format or API version. So the JSON changes and therefore you actually have bugs in production, but not in your test suite. And like, it just seems to reach for that kind of stubbing things out and whatever all the time. I had a few that was like, it's removing constants and resetting them to test some example thing. It's like, okay, but like it's a constant for a reason. Just kind of leave it at the value it is. We don't really need to do that in the test suite. It's kind of just going overboard, writing and locking things down into whatever we sort of told it or whatever it assumed we wanted. And it's like also getting into the what detail you need to explain of like, this is what I want. If you're too vague, it can run free and make a bunch of decisions that, hey, I wish you would have asked before you did all that. So I bet that's part of the tuning too, of as you learn about how to prompt things better, that you can limit those sort of free running directions it takes or whatever.
I like stubs, FYI.
You would.
I'm not going to derail us into a whole stubbing conversation, but like it helps me eliminate the amount of objects I need to set up and test sometimes. Like I don't care if like object.foo.bar.y is that's not relevant to this test. Like just stub that.
That's okay in that case. But it's easy to make that mistake, I think, where it seems irrelevant and actually in the future it becomes relevant and you didn't realize it. I think that's the trap to it. You have to know for sure that in the future, this will never matter, but we just have to have this stupid thing around. We're doing something, testing maybe a Hatchbox cluster application. It's like, well, we have to have an account. But like, frankly, I don't care what the account is. It makes no difference because the thing we care about is whatever sub record or something. But you can definitely get into some weird things where like, oh yeah, I guess we did stub that and never realize that it would actually matter later on.
Yeah, and I'm not against mocks or stubs. Like I use them, but I'm against this whole idea of like using it too much. There is a thing as too much mocking or too much stubbing, and there's a line there. But yeah, I think that's also something where you can basically tweak your Gen AI agent to follow your directions. And maybe if you don't want it to mock all the things, you can be more explicit in the instructions you give it. I feel like this new world where it's like we're all using AI, we have to have like really good guardrails. And I feel like the Ruby tech debt and Ruby code quality gems are kind of like the land of the living dead out there. Kind of what Chris was saying earlier, like a fork of a fork of a fork is kind of what's happening there. And it's not just Ruby, like in the JavaScript world, it happens too. There's a project called ES Plato, which kind of helps you generate metrics on churn and complexity. And with one of our productized services, we forked it and it's now up.js-Plato, and we maintain it now. But I feel like in the code quality world right now, there's not that much movement. Sure, there's Rubocop, there's Standard, there's Ruby Critic, and then there are not that many other tools out there. And of course, like Ruby Critic uses Flog and Reek and all that, but there are projects like Metric Foo that were cool at some point, and they were eventually abandoned, and our team ended up maintaining it, but we haven't really invested a ton of time there. And I feel like that's another area where if you're going to set up AI to follow guardrails, you probably want to use those tools to say, hey, if you're going to be doing whatever and generating so much code for this particular feature, I still want to care about like the grade of this file. Like I don't want it to drop below like a D or an E. I want it to be usually between like an A and a B so that it's easier to maintain, which also leads us to another conversation that is like, do we care about the code quality as much as we used to care like a year ago? And I'd love to know your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, that was the question that came to mind for sure. There was a few years ago, that was like constant conversation about measuring code quality and test coverage and all of that. But I feel like a lot of that has died off. And maybe it's partially that's just like, well, the code it generates these days is actually pretty decent. It is good enough that a lot of times, maybe I'll have Claude generate something and Copilot review it. Most of the time, Copilot's like, well, it looks pretty good to me. There may be a couple inconsistencies or something, or it misses like some edge case that one catches that the other doesn't. And that's very helpful because you're like, well, I never would have thought about that edge case, and it probably would have found it in production. But sometimes you're like, do I even care? Do I even care anymore that we hit every edge case? Because writing this all manually, I never would have hit this until it hit production. So I don't know. I've been kind of like less personally like, okay, I'm pretty sure that it's thought about a lot of these things, and it catches doing code reviews so many edge cases for me that I'm like, whoa, I would have missed that. So now I'm like already pretty confident that it's going to be decent. And if something does go wrong, just open up Claude again and be like, here, this happened on this line of code. This is the error. This is the user or whatever. And like, you can fix things faster too. So I've felt like personally, a lot of those metrics are less important just because I'm more confident that like it's going to handle more of the edge cases out of the box. And then if something does go wrong, I can add a note and say, hey, this happened. Can we make sure that's taken care of too? But you do have to make sure that, yes, there is a strong test suite for it so that when it goes and fixes that issue, it doesn't break some of the features it previously wrote. But you can see too that every time you ask Claude to do something, it's going to generate a bunch of tests and try and do pretty good coverage on it already. So, and it's far less tempted, I will say, than it was in the past to just like, well, that test is, I'm just going to delete it so we can fix this the issue you told me about. Now it's like, okay, that was wrong. Let me go fix the original test the way that we thought it was testing things and add the new bug and test against that too. So I feel like in general, like the quality of stuff it does, thinking through what I ask it to do, is improved light years in the last 12, 16 or 18 months or whatever it is. I've like had far less interest in like what my exact code coverage percentage is these days. That's just my feelings. What do you guys think?
I just got depression from what you just said.
Yeah.
Are you tired of babysitting your job queues? Let us do it for you. JudoScale monitors and autoscales your job queues so you can stop babysitting and get back to coding. We support Sidekick, SolidQ, GoodJob, and just about every other job backend in Rubyland. And of course, we autoscale your web services too. JudoScale scales up your apps faster than any other autoscaler, so request timeouts and backed up job queues are mitigated before they become a problem. JudoScale has a free plan you can use forever, so there's literally no risk, whether you're on Heroku, AWS, Render, or any other cloud platform. Visit judoscale.com and get your job queues under control.
I agree with part of what you said, that yes, it's gotten a lot better and this and that over the years. And so it is leading to better results, especially if you're doing like adversarial code reviews with another model or whatever. But at the same time, I feel like it's slopifying our code base to a degree where it's like, if I had architected this, I would have named it like this and it would have been here. And I would have then known, like, when my designer's like, okay, can we change this and that? I would know exactly where to go to change that. But now I don't know where the hell it is because of the way like Claude organized this, which is not the way I might have done it. But I obviously didn't care enough to change it when it did it. So
that's the worst part about all this. How do you care enough to guide it while it's doing it?
Yeah.
I just added a thing this morning to Lexi where the other day I added a extension to Lexi that can make an input field that forces everything inside of a code block. And I needed caddy file syntax support. So it also generated a Prism grammar parser for highlighting, which was awesome. And that all worked well. But then I realized this morning, like, if you have a regular Lexi field and you do a code block, the language list doesn't have the caddy file option in there. So you can kind of type it into the editor and it'll just format correctly, but it doesn't have the right label. And so I asked Claude to go fix that. And it was like, you got it. Confirmed it works. Chewed on it for a minute and it worked. But it was like, let me read the Lexi source code. Here's where it defines the languages. And that's not exported, so nobody can really access it. So because I can't change that and add caddy file to the list, I'm going to set up all this stuff. I don't know, 50 lines of code for it to just like monitor Lexi getting mounted to the page and then finding the code, the select box for the code languages, and then injecting itself into there and doing all this like crazy stuff. And with lots of comments to explain like why we had to do all this workaround or whatever. When if it was me doing it, I would have gone straight to Lexi, looked at the source code, found out that it is not easy to extend, made a fork, made it easy to extend, and then used my fork and made a pull request to improve Lexi at the same time. And just like my life would be easier, the code would be way simpler. Because now we're going to live with this thing for a while. I still don't have the PR to Lexi to make it easier for anyone else. So I still need to go do that. Now I've just done twice or more amount of work. There's a lot of mess now to clean up and whatever. So like, I totally feel that. That is the biggest thing. And when there's small issues like that, and you're just like, I would love you to go fix this and not have to worry about it, because it is 100% a side quest for me. And I should not put any effort into this. But yet, I'm going to be generating a bunch of slop. If I do that 100 or 1,000 times, my damn code base is going to become something that I no longer understand, because it writes code in weird ways and not the Rails way or not the stimulus way or whatever, and becomes way harder to understand and come back to and fix. And then you're going to have to use frickin' Claude to go edit any of Claude's generated code because you can't understand it, which is only going to slopify it more.
There, you're getting it. You're getting it. He's almost there.
It's such a hard thing because, like, in the day to day, you want to reach for it so many times because you're like, that's a tiny little bug fix. Go do it. But then you look back at the end of the week and you're like, I got some good stuff done, but it was a lot of little things. And now it feels way messier than it should be. But I would have done a fifth of those features this week if it wasn't for AI. So it's like such a weird trade-off where you're like really sacrificing the future for what feels really, really, I don't know, fulfilling in the short term. But boy, is it a mess.
I've had 2 PRs this week where I was like, go fix this thing. And then I come back and I'm like, that's a lot of code. And then the TLDR of both of those things is like a small CSS change just fixed both of them. And I'm like, cool. So all I had to do was remove this not condition to fix this like 1,000 line of code that you added. And all I had to do here was add white space pre-wrap. And that would have fixed all these other things that you're trying to do.
I've seen that firsthand, and I think we all see it where like Claude or any of these agents lean on more code, new stuff, instead of like building on top was already there. Like I was using Claude Design the other day to design like our new Rails infrastructure assessment landing page, and started building all these like new components and yada, yada. And I was like, we already have a design system. We already have like HTML and CSS that works, and you don't really need new elements in this design. So please, for the love of God, just use what's there and do not create any new elements or sections or CSS that's going to be like harder for me to maintain. And with Claude Code, it's similar. Basically, you can ask Claude Code to upgrade from Rails 3.2 to 4.0, which is something we were doing before we open sourced our skill. And Claude Code will be like, I'm just going to start upgrading it. I'm not going to dual boot the application at all. I'm not going to use Next Rails because it adds too many conditionals. And we have been doing this for a long time, 60,000 dev hours upgrading Rails. And we know that you want dual booting in there to debug some weird issues, to gradually deploy to production and stuff like that. So it started as a rant with Claude, trying to get it to dual boot and being like, just this judgment call, let me do it, because I have the experience to tell you that you want dual booting just in case when we get to a thorny issue, it's going to be there. It's going to make our lives easier. And that's how this skill, and actually it's like a set of 3 different skills, came to be. It's like, okay, we're going to force Claude's hand into dual booting and basically using the Next Rails gem to do so. But yeah, I think like it's a slippery slope when you start letting AI make these judgment calls for you instead of just the implementation.
Yeah, you think what comes to mind is like, you have to probably assume they've trained it specifically to do that, because the general assumption, if you're new to a code base, what is already existing, if you're being asked to change something, like you don't want to change the underlying stuff if you don't fully understand it. Like you don't want to accidentally break something. But that one line CSS change that Andrew was talking about, like Andrew understands that the existing stuff could be wrong and that's okay. And we can change that. Whereas they probably intentionally designed the LLMs to put way more focus on let's add things just to be safe, because we're going to risk breaking things way less. And they probably way over indexed on that because AI wasn't that good for so long and it's getting much closer, but still not there yet. But if they don't have the context of working on this project for 10 years, then like, how would they know that it's safe to go like, look, this is some old ass legacy code that we wrote a long time ago. The business changed, because that's the context they don't understand either. Is like, there's a whole lot of pivots every company makes. The product changes over the years. The like important things that you needed to work on marketing for 6 months, and now you're working on expanding the business in this way or whatever. All those other external factors, like it can't even remotely comprehend. So it's just going to be like, with the limited knowledge I have, I guess this is probably the safest way to do it. Just throw more things out there and maybe reluctantly change what currently exists, unless you explicitly tell me to. But it feels like what it really should be doing is like, and it sucks to babysit the prompts all the time. It should ask for permission or advice way more often. Hey, there's 3 or 4 different ways to tackle this. What do you want me to do? And occasionally Claude will prompt me and be like, here's the recommended way, but here's a couple other options, or just chat with me and we can figure out a solution. I would like that prompt a lot more often. If I could stop you in the middle of doing something and just talk and redirect you the right way, that's what I would do training a junior that joined the team. But they also want it to be fully automated too. So they're like competing with their own goals there. They want to make really good code generated for you, but also want to get completely out of your way. And so it's like fighting, they're mutually exclusive kind of decisions to go after or whatever. So it's got to be a hard problem to solve, but that's how I feel like it's going right now. And it'll probably get a lot better in the future, but that's one of the big guesses as to why it's like, yeah, we'll just throw more code at the problem, which that is my biggest fear, is like, I'm adding all this CSS or whatever because I ask it to fix this or JavaScript to fix that. And it's not a good use of my time. These need to get fixed. So I'll have Claude do it. But now who's going to come back and maintain this? Claude.
Yeah. And it's a bit tricky as well because a lot of the cost is subsidized by OpenAI and Anthropic. So I think as engineers, we kind of need to keep tabs on other open models. Like I've heard great things about like Kimi and K3. And I know Drew Bragg, my co-organizer at Philly RB, he's been like playing with that. And I think that it's important to have options. At some point, like Anthropic could come out and be like, okay, we're going to double the price because we don't want to subsidize the price anymore. And then it quickly could become like super expensive. So I like that there are alternatives and like open models out there that we could use in the future.
Yeah, and you're beholden to what they want to focus on, whereas you might actually be better off training an LLM purely on how you want to write code, and you could have it ask you more often for advice and direction or whatever. You can make those changes and tailor it to be very freaking good at Rails and say like, keep an eye on all of the new things in Rails main on a regular basis, go train against whatever This Week in Rails talks about is here's the new things coming in the next version of Rails. My day-to-day is often keeping an eye on that stuff So when I do implement a feature, I can be ready to take advantage of the new feature and not write some code that's going to have to be rewritten here in whatever, about a month when Rails 8.2 comes out. I want to be ahead of that so that I just have like Rails 8.2 upgrade. Everything was perfect. I didn't have to change anything, ideally. And yeah, I think that having it open, just like open source code, adds that possibility for you to take Rails and go build a freaking Shopify or whatever off of some stuff that just exists, that if you didn't have a framework like that, you wouldn't have the freedom to go turn it into what you need necessarily. You'd have to buy, what was Toby going to buy some off the shelf web server software if you didn't have open source framework to build on? Probably not. That wouldn't have worked to go build a company of that size. So I think it's really important that we have those open ones so that people can try new things and have new ideas and whatever. Because at the end of the day, Gemini has to benefit Google in some way financially. Same with Anthropic. They got to pay back their investors. They got to IPO at some point. They got financial things. Same with every one of them. They're a company. They have to have that as kind of their top priority. Obviously, to get there, they've got to benefit their users, but that doesn't necessarily mean they take care of everybody. They're going to take care of their most valuable paying users there. So it's critical that we have the other ways of doing things that are open source or whatever to try stuff. So I'm with you 100%.
Yeah. And on the consulting front, you were asking earlier, like, how does AI impact our consulting hours? And I feel like there's a shift in where human hours are going. So, our customers engage with us, and a lot of our time goes into like code reviewing some of these like AI generated pull requests. A lot of our time these days goes more and more to assessing the infrastructure and trying to find like security issues, because with all these new models that are coming out with more power and like more security aware, you hear all these crazy stories that it finds like new CVEs and new vulnerabilities super quickly. So that's a lot of the work that we've been doing, where sometimes we start working with a customer on a Rails upgrade because their security officer is like, hey, if we don't upgrade, we're not going to be SOC 2 compliant anymore. So they come to us for Rails upgrades, and then eventually they like the work we do. And then that goes beyond into like their infrastructure, like Docker, Kubernetes, and other sort of like system audits to make sure like, hey, Rails is on Rails 8, it's secure, it's getting security updates, but then also all these JavaScript libraries that you have in your code base need to be upgraded. And from a consulting perspective, like doing the audits is great for us because we find so much information about like things that need to be done for security purposes. And for the client, it's like, yeah, this is important because there's a ton of customers that care about compliance and making sure that they're running on like libraries that are getting like security patches consistently.
That makes sense. How's the shift gone for human hours? Is it going down? In theory, I could see it staying even, but I feel like everybody's cutting back on budgets. But in theory, my friend told me, he was like, if AI was really that good, then say a large company or one that's on its way to being a large company, if all their engineers were 10x more productive, you would expect that they would want to invest way more money instead of cutting back on spending, because they would be able to outpace all the competition. If that were really true, that they could do 10 or 100 times more that they claim, it's like not actually translating into business growth or financials necessarily. So I've been curious about that, because you still hear all the like, yeah, we're laying off all these developers, even though everybody's so much more productive, but you don't see the software in your car or anything growing and becoming way, way better. It's like, it's still the same crappy Ford software or Chevy software or whatever. And it seems like it's still being a bit of an excuse to people are struggling financially, and they're using it as an excuse to kind of cut back on spending, which is fine, but it's like doesn't quite add up to the hype claims of like, we're just so productive now because we have AI and everything's just so great. Like, okay, then why are you laying off people?
Yeah, I think that's where the hype and some of the lies are, where companies are like, maybe we overhired and now we're going to use AI to say, oh, we're more efficient. So we're going to let go of all these engineers. So we're a small business. We're 14 people. So we're not huge, but we do see a lot more work related to automations that involve AI. So when I talk about like the infrastructure assessments, that's the start, right? Like once you do the research and you have all the information in one place, then you can plug in like AI, Claude, or Codex or whatever and say, hey, we found all these issues with this particular infrastructure. And then you can use the agent to start submitting changes to Docker, to package JSON, to gem files to start like upgrading. And it's not just like the PandaBot. You could use the PandaBot for that. But then what the agent can do as well is also pair those patches or minor or major upgrades with application code changes. So that's the type of work we're doing for some of our top customers where we are doing the upgrade. We're also like slowly, gradually modularizing Rails applications to make them more maintainable. But then at the same time, they're like, okay, cool. What else can you do with AI? And it's like, oh, well, we're doing proof of concepts that basically show if you have like a really good research and audit phase, you can use that information to then feed it into your agent, and that will submit like pull requests that are like easier to review for a human. And yeah, I feel like that's the next step. Is like, it is pretty cool if you can make maintenance easier with AI agents so that your humans can be more involved in like the product roadmap and understanding like user requirements and shipping more features to their customers. I think that's the dream. And I feel like with AI, we're getting so close to that, so that, yes, you might need fewer humans to maintain and secure an application, but you can use the humans you have right now to make the product better for your customers. And when I talk to customers and small businesses about AI, I always want to focus on like, hey, we don't want to come in and implement something that will mean like, oh, you have to lay people off now because you're more efficient. I'm more interested in the whole like, hey, we want you to keep the same team. We want you to keep the same humans. We just want you to be more profitable with the same amount of humans plus AI. Because I think the key for me is just like experience combined with AI is like a really cool thing, because if you can drive it in the right direction and save you tons of time.
Speaking of the people or the existing team and using AI, what is one big mistake that you kind of commonly see with these teams that you come in with how they're currently using it? Or is there like a single pattern that kind of sticks out?
Yeah, I think like the main problem is like when you think you can do Python, even though you haven't seen like a line of Python in your whole life, and then you start trusting the AI that it's making the right calls. And that's why I say like experience is key if you're going to use AI in the right direction. So all this vibe coded applications, they're great because these days we don't get leads or people who are like, I want to build a new Facebook for dogs. And we're like, just go to Lovable and like build it yourself, validate it, and then we'll talk once you have like 10 customers. So I love that as it empowers non-technical folks to vibe code something quickly and validate things. But yeah, for us, I think that the mistake is when you're building something in a technology you don't know and you trust the AI too much to make the right decisions for you. Like what you were saying earlier, like, I don't know if I would have implemented the model or the database this way because my vision does not match what that database structure looks like.
How did you know I was writing all that Go code that I don't understand at all?
I've done it. Yeah, I played with Go and AI, but I don't trust the code that I've generated with it because I don't know much about Go.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I've seen from consultants that don't necessarily work in tech is that they've said things like, well, the problem is like you want AI to do all these things that your employees are already doing, but you have no standards, you have no run books, you don't have a system, so we can't design AI skills and stuff for you to run your system if you don't have one, if you don't have consistency anywhere.
Consistency in what way?
Let's go easy. Like the way you write a component. Maybe I like to write it one way and you like to write it another way. And Chris likes to write it in just partials. And there's no real decision structure around this is the way we write our components, or this is the way we write our specs. These are the specs we care about, and these are the ones we don't. And there's just no real consensus among the team because, I mean, the beauty of Ruby is that you can write it kind of in your own way, right? It's so flexible that like I might be writing a completely different style of Ruby that Chris is writing, but at the end of the day, that doesn't take away from the
Yours
quality.
Is wrong. Mine is right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure it is actually, but if there's no like consistent decision among the team of like, this is how we do this thing for long running migrations, for example, or like one person may write a rake task to backfill it. One person may do it in the console in production. One person may use the maintenance task gem. Like if there's no real decision around this is the way we do things, you can't really start to automate the process because there is no process.
Yeah. And I feel like about 2 months ago, my team finally went all in on Claude. For a while, we were like testing different tools and we said, okay, we're just going to consolidate on Claude. And then that meant, okay, every repository has its Claude MD. Every review MD has very similar guidelines so that you can use AI to enforce consolidation or consistency. And I do love that. And in Ruby also, like you have Rubocop and standard to implement like code style. But yeah, I feel like there is value on an entire organization going with one agent and saying like, okay, yeah, you found like the review missed these things. So cool. Comment on the pull request and then make an adjustment to like the review scale for Claude so that it doesn't miss it next time. And I think that's kind of like the best way to approach it is like, okay, you have to maintain the repository and the code and you might have to make it maintainable, but also you have to slightly and gradually improve the Claude skills so that it's also consistent with what your team agreed on in terms of like code quality and acceptable levels of tech debt.
Yeah. We had a discussion the other day because we have a create PR skill. And I was like, I think only 2 people in the team are actually using it. I'm like, okay, well, why aren't the rest of you using it? They're like, well, we have our own that we like. And I'm like, well, why can't you just incorporate what you like into the skill? And they're like, well, because I don't necessarily want to impose my thing on everyone else. And I'm like, but isn't that the goal of the skill? Is that so that we all are creating like consistency? And I think that was kind of my main point is that if a team doesn't have consistent, and that's a very low hanging fruit, right? That doesn't really matter the way you write the PR description necessarily. But that kind of goes back to my point of like, if you don't have any standards or like decisions or SOPs or run books or whatever on your team, and there's no real decision hierarchy, then it's going to be really hard for you to write skills to automate things that you don't really know how to automate. You couldn't probably do it yourself.
I feel like that is the human factor, whereas you detect it as like, hey, 2 people were not using the create PR skill. And you're like, why not? Let's just have a call or have a meeting to make sure like we're all using the same skills. It'll save us time like doing like silly reviews or nitpicky comments on pull requests, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, Chris, David, any other questions?
I can't think of anything. Anything you want to dig into, Ernesto?
Just if anybody listening the episode wants to give the Claude Code Rails upgrade skill a try, I would love that. And if they can create an issue, that would be awesome. Ideally, it works, but if it doesn't, an issue is super welcome.
Well, there's lots of reason to try it here in a month or so when Rails 8.2 drops at Rails World. So this is good timing for that right before it comes out. I was just yesterday fixing something where there's now a new configuration thing that tries to detect if your, say, initializer code or a Rails engine you've written like eager loads active record or something earlier than it should have. You can configure it to actually raise an error, which is nice. Devise routes are generated based upon the models, though, so it's a little tricky and sounded like Carlos is going to have some work to do to like refactor that. to improve it for that. But he's got an issue open about it because they've also been working at like the lazy route generation for a while. So it's kind of related to all that stuff just to make booting Rails even faster. But somebody brought up like, hey, your PageM loads active record earlier during an initializer. And I was like, oh, that's a great point. Didn't even cross my mind, but we did load one model that we didn't necessarily need to. So slap some load hooks, or we already had load hooks. I just used them for it instead. I already had the solution sitting right there in front of me, but I didn't realize it. But now Rails gives me that like tool. So those are probably little good, also useful things. I'm sure that you guys do too, or could put in the skill. Like in development, you don't need to raise an error in production. If anything does eager load too soon, use that config in development, and that may be a good addition to add for Rails 8.2 or whatever. But that's kind of the value of using a tool like that rather than just running, say, the Rails app upgrade command and then reading the couple config default changes that they like have made. There's way more to it that you can actually apply if you've noticed all of the various things that have changed in the Rails versions.
Yeah, and that helps for sure. It started as a Claude skill with 2 hard rules, where it was you're going to dual boot with 2 different versions of Rails or Ruby if you're upgrading Ruby, and you need a test suite. So that one, the second one, is the one that changed very quickly because there are a lot of applications out there that don't have a test suite. And someone came up with the idea of just running, Rails runner or Rails console just to boot it. So it's like
to like test.
Yeah, kind of like poor man's test is to, I start Rails with the next version of Rails? And it does that. It's like, okay, does it find a test suite? No. Okay, cool. Let's do like the most basic test with the next version of Rails, and it will detect issues, like you said, at load time, at boot time, that could stop your upgrade. And then, unfortunately, it's not going to run the test suite because there isn't any, but it will make it easier for you to start like smoke testing it or doing manual QA in development.
Yeah, that's handy. I like it. I'll have to try it this next upgrade. I've already got a start on things in a branch, but I will test it on something that I haven't prepared anything for to see how that works. I have plenty of apps that will be good to try it with. So yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah, and if anybody needs humans to help with their upgrade, our company can help with that as well. It does make the upgrades more cost effective because we are using less human hours to do upgrades and more AI tokens. So it does make our services more, I guess you get more bang for your buck in simple terms.
Can't complain about that. That's great. All righty. Yeah, anything else before we wrap up?
No, I hope folks can make it to the next Philly Ruby meetup. With Drew Bragg, I'm one of the co-organizers, and we have lightning talks on Monday after this episode comes out. So hope to see some of you all there.
Awesome. Well, we will have you back on, I promise, shorter than 6 years from now. Oh God, that's 2032.
Bring you back to the 400th episode.
Oh my goodness.
Maybe in 4 years, I'll be back. Okay.
Yeah. Good Lord. Thinking about 2030. That's insane. We got to stop. I can't think about that anymore.
Yeah.
Well, we'll catch you guys later.
All right. Have a good one.